Okay, so continuing on in our series on seller tips, in other words, things that I know would have helped my sellers had they known before they listed. Today we're going to talk about the very important topic of setting price. You do not want to ask too much, and neither do you certainly want to ask too little. And so let's dive into some of this. Asking too much is particularly dangerous, and here's the reason why. If you go beyond what the market actually says your house is worth, what ends up happening is once you list your property, your house just sits unsold. Why? Because people are discouraged to go visit it, and the less showings that you're taking, the less offers that you receive, and it just sits unsold. Here's the critical factor. You want to know how many days on average a similar house to yours it takes to sell and actually come under contract. Once you've exceeded that number of days on market, if your house still hasn't sold, it suggests to everybody involved there's something wrong with the property. Either there's something wrong with the condition of the property, or you're just asking too much. And what you end up having to do is make a price reduction, which is very bad PR. So you want to avoid a price reduction, and you might as well price it well from the beginning. If you ask, on the other hand, too little, well, obviously then you're leaving money on the table. And a couple years ago, 2021 and before, the market was so hot that you could almost ask anything. And just because of the bidding war, you almost would guarantee that you're going to get above market value for the property. Well, that's not really the case anymore. The market settled a little bit. And so you really want to understand, what does the market say is the value of your house? And you want to price right there or just a little bit above that is your key. And so it begs the question, how then do we actually determine that price? Well, let me say a couple things that it can't be used to determine the value of the property that people oftentimes get wrong. Number one is what you need the house to sell for. That is a completely non-astute business approach to pricing a product. You can't just price it according to what you need. That's not a motivating factor for the market, and therefore it's not a motivating factor for the actual price of your house. Another misconception is what you owe on the property. Well, that doesn't really necessarily say what it's worth. Another misconception, and this one's a hard pill for some to swallow, is how much you have invested in the property since you've owned it. So somebody may have invested a whole bunch of money fixing this and that, and there's some kind of a leak, and they had to, fix some roof problem and the garage door and all of these things. What you invest in your property may only be maintaining the condition of the property, but that doesn't necessarily add value. Adding value would be things like creating new finished space, adding heated square footage, or especially remodeling the house, updating it, and those sorts of things. And so just because you've invested in creating a man cave or something, that doesn't necessarily say that the market feels like that man cave is worth an extra $10,000 or whatever. So it's not even just what you've invested in the property. The price is determined simply by the market. The market, what buyers are willing to pay, what lenders are willing to invest in the property similar to yours, that and that alone determines the price, the asking price of your home. And so that boils down to comps. So how do we know how to price our home based on comps? How do we choose the right comps? How do we know how to do that? Well, here's a few things that are good rules of thumb. First of all, you want to look at, in most cases around Metro Detroit, usually around a third of a mile from your property, maybe up to a half a mile away in certain situations if there aren't a lot of sales in the area. So you want to find something that's close in proximity, but also is in your kind of area. For example, if you're on the border of Detroit and Grosse Pointe, and your property is in Detroit, you shouldn't be using comps from Grosse Pointe because it's a very different real estate market. So you want to stay with comps that are near your subject property and also in a similar market as yours. So area. Number two would be size. I like to stay within a 10% range of square footage, finished square footage. Another thing would be the overall condition of the property, number of beds and bath, and then similar exterior composition. So if you've got vinyl siding or wood siding, you generally want to find comps that also have that in general. You've got to make value adjustments for any kind of differential. Has your home not been remodeled. I all the time talk to sellers who are saying, well, the house down the street sold for $400,000. I should ask at least $350. And you look at the house down the street and it was remodeled beautifully with all new everything. That's apples and oranges. So you have to be looking at similar properties and making adjustments accordingly. Zestimate. I would just want to make a point about Zestimate real quick. Zestimate, the valuation that Zillow gives for a property, does bear on the public's idea of what your house is worth. But you need to get an actual realtor in there. And a little quick plug, that would be me. So you want to have a human being who actually studies the market. The reality is, once a listing agent lists the property, that's going to syndicate onto Zillow. And the Zestimate is usually going to adjust itself based on what the realtor puts in. And so if the realtor does their job well, the Zestimate will kind of update itself. The issue with Zestimates is it's an algorithm. It's not a human being looking at your actual property, and therefore it really can't evaluate your property without actually seeing it and knowing the market. So if you're thinking of selling, or if you know anyone selling, anywhere in Southeast Michigan, you know how to contact me. Make sure you put me in touch with anybody. I'd love to help. And let's like this if you like it. Subscribe to my channel. Comment. Love to hear your questions. Share this, and I'll see you next time.